My name's Mark, I'm 23 years old, and last month was supposed to be one of the proudest days of my life. After years of staying up late, juggling part-time jobs, and constantly proving to myself that I could actually make it, I finally walked across the stage to receive my college diploma. I had pictured this moment since I was a kid, the crowd clapping, my family cheering loudly, maybe my mom crying into a tissue like she always does at the smallest milestones. Instead, when I looked out into the sea of parents, grandparents, and siblings waving and snapping photos, the entire row of seats reserved for my family stayed empty. Not one of them showed. The night before graduation, my dad had texted into the family group chat reminding everyone to be on time because he'd reserved front row seats. That's what stuck with me. He reminded everyone else. Me? I didn't need reminding. I had been holding on to this day like oxygen. So when the announcer called my name and I walked across the stage, I tried to convince myself maybe they were running late, maybe traffic, maybe something reasonable. But as the ceremony ended and I clutched the diploma I'd worked so hard for, I finally unlocked my phone to see a single text from my mom in the group chat. Sorry, Mark. It's your brother's birthday today. We'll celebrate you another time. My brother, Matt, turned 18 that day. He got a family barbecue, cake, and apparently every ounce of attention my parents could muster. I got silence. What hurt most wasn't just the empty seats. It was the way it confirmed what I'd been feeling for years, that Matt would always come first. He was the golden child, the athlete, the one with the big future, according to my parents. I was just the kid who had to figure everything out alone. When I scrolled further down my notifications, though, the pit in my stomach dropped deeper. My dad had spam called me 37 times during the ceremony. 37. And the last text he sent me, after I ignored the calls because, I was walking across a stage, was short and sharp. Come home immediately. That message burned into my head as I sat in my car afterward, parked under a tree outside the auditorium while other graduates hugged their families and posed for photos. I wanted to cry, but more than that, I wanted answers. Why was it so urgent that my dad blew up my phone while ignoring the fact that I was graduating? Why couldn't they have waited 2 hours to drag me back home? My gut told me it wasn't about me at all. It never was. And as much as I hated to admit it, that single text, combined with the missed calls, was the beginning of something bigger. Something that would change everything between me and my family. But I guess before I dive into what happened when I got home, you need to understand the way things always were in my family. My parents had a pattern. Matt's achievements were paraded around like Olympic medals. My soccer games in high school, barely a mention. My brother's C+ on a math test? He's brilliant, just not applying himself. My scholarships? That's great, but Matt's varsity football banquet is the same night. We'll see if we can make it. They didn't. That was always the line. We'll see. And when it came to me, it always meant no. I remember when I got my acceptance letter into the university. I opened it in the kitchen, so excited I could barely breathe, and showed it to my mom. She smiled politely, nodded, and then said, "That's wonderful, honey. But can you help Matt with his history paper? He's really struggling." It was like my milestones were treated as background noise, just another thing happening in the house, while Matt's every sneeze was broadcast on a loudspeaker. And I put up with it, year after year, because some part of me still believed graduation would be different. That one day, when my name was called and I walked across that stage, they would finally see me. Instead, I walked alone. I drove home alone. And I opened the front door to the smell of frosting and barbecue smoke, laughter pouring out of the living room, and my entire family crowded around Matt as he cut into his giant cake with his name plastered across it. My diploma case still clutched in my hand. My dad finally looked up and said, "Mark, you're late. We need to talk." That was it. No congratulations. No, we're proud of you. Just that cold, clipped tone he always used when he was about to tell me I owed the family something. And that's where things started to unravel. Because the reason he called me home wasn't just about a family barbecue. It was about money. It was about control. And it was about to drag me into the ugliest family fight I had ever faced. I stepped into the house, diploma case still in my hand, and the noise from the living room hit me like a wall. Everyone was there. My parents, my aunts and uncles, even some of Matt's friends from school. The dining table was covered in trays of food, balloons taped to the walls, and a big banner that read "Happy 18th Matt" in bold gold letters. It looked like something out of a catalog. And there I was, standing in the doorway with the piece of paper I'd spent years fighting for, invisible in plain sight. Matt spotted me first. He had frosting smeared on his cheek, knife still in his hand from cutting the cake. "Oh, hey, Mark," he said with a smirk, his voice dripping with fake surprise. "Didn't think you'd make it. Too busy with your, little school thing?" Everyone laughed like he'd just cracked the joke of the century. My cheeks burned. Little school thing. For years of sweat and sacrifice reduced to a throwaway line, like I'd wasted my time on a hobby. My mom swooped in then, wiping her hands on an apron and giving me the quickest hug possible. "You look nice," she said automatically, not even glancing at the diploma case. "We saved you a plate. Go sit down before the food gets cold." She moved past me without another word, fussing over Matt, who leaned back in his chair like a king surrounded by his court. My dad, however, didn't laugh, didn't smile. He was sitting at the head of the table, his phone in hand, his expression serious. He gestured for me to follow him into the kitchen, away from the crowd. "We need to talk," he repeated, his tone sharp enough to cut through the noise. I followed, my heart pounding, already bracing myself. He closed the kitchen door behind us and folded his arms. "Mark," he said, "your brother is about to be an adult. We're planning some big things for his future. College, a car, maybe even helping him put a down payment on a condo someday. But right now, we need everyone in the family to contribute." The words hit me like ice water. Contribute. I echoed. He nodded. "You've got that job lined up after graduation, don't you? It's only fair you help out. You're the oldest. Your brother has potential, real potential, but he needs support. This family has always pulled together, and now it's your turn." I stared at him, stunned. "So, let me get this straight. You couldn't show up to my graduation, but now you're asking me to give you money for Matt's future. Don't make this about you," he snapped instantly, his voice rising. "We celebrated you when you got into college. We supported you in our own way. But your brother, he's the one who can really go places. You'll be fine on your own. You always have been." I wanted to scream. Supported me in their own way? The memory of taking out student loans flashed through my mind. Working late nights at a gas station to pay for books. Eating instant noodles while Matt got new cleats every season. Fine on my own. I had no choice but to be fine on my own. When we came back into the living room, my dad clapped his hands to get everyone's attention. "We were just talking," he announced loudly, like it was some kind of family decision we'd both agreed on. "Mark's going to help pitch in for Matt's future. He understands how important this is." All eyes turned to me. My mom beamed. My aunts murmured about what a good brother I was. And Matt? He leaned back in his chair, grinning smugly. "Thanks, bro," he said, raising his soda can like a toast. "Knew you'd come through." I stood there frozen, every word catching in my throat. My dad had just volunteered my future like it was a family resource, something they could carve up and hand to Matt as another present. Nobody even asked me. Nobody even cared what I thought. Later, as I sat at the edge of the room, picking at the plate of food my mom had pushed into my hands, I overheard snippets of conversation that twisted the knife deeper. My uncle leaned over to Matt. "So, you're getting the car next month, right? That'll be huge for you." My aunt chimed in. "With Mark helping out, you'll have a real leg up. Not everyone's lucky enough to have such a supportive older brother." Supportive. That word echoed in my head like a curse. Supportive, when they never supported me. Supportive, when my own graduation was treated like an inconvenience. Supportive, when all they saw me as was a wallet. And then, as if to rub salt in the wound, Matt opened his next gift, a brand new watch. My mom clasped her hands together, eyes shining. "You deserve it, sweetheart," she said proudly. "You've worked so hard this year." Worked hard? He'd coasted through high school on charm and excuses, while I fought tooth and nail for everything. And still, the applause, the gifts, the adoration, it all belonged to him. Sitting there, invisible in a room full of people, I realized something cold and sharp settling in my chest. They weren't just showing favoritism anymore. They were demanding my sacrifice to fuel his future. And if I didn't stop it, they'd bleed me dry, one family contribution at a time. I didn't know exactly how yet, but a part of me decided in that moment. I wasn't going to let them get away with this. That night, after the party wound down and the last of the guests filtered out, I stayed behind to help clean up. Not because anyone asked me to, no one ever did, but because it gave me an excuse to avoid the spotlight that always hovered over Matt. I stacked empty plates, gathered cups, and tied up trash bags while my parents gushed over how mature Matt looked blowing out his candles. Every word felt like it chipped away at me, but I swallowed it, waiting for the evening to be over so I could finally leave. When I went to grab my coat from the hallway, I noticed my dad's office door cracked open. Normally, he kept it shut like a vault, locked whenever he wasn't inside. Curiosity tugged at me, so I peeked in. His desk lamp glowed, papers scattered across the surface. But it wasn't the papers that caught my eye. It was the thick manila folder sitting square in the center, with my name written across the front in his handwriting. I hesitated, then stepped inside, my pulse quickening. I wasn't supposed to be in here, but something about that folder felt like it was daring me to look. I pulled it open, expecting maybe old report cards or documents from my college applications. Instead, I found bank statements, loan agreements, my student loan paperwork. But at the bottom of the stack, something made my stomach turn. A withdrawal slip for several $1,000s from my personal savings account. My account, the one I'd been putting money into since high school. The one I'd been saving from every miserable part-time job. The one I thought was mine. And scrawled in my dad's unmistakable handwriting across the margin, for Matt's car fund. I felt the blood drain from my face. I flipped through the pages faster, heart pounding. There were multiple slips, some small, some large, stretching back months. All withdrawals, all from my account, funneled neatly into what my dad had casually referred to earlier as family contributions. They hadn't just planned to use my future to fund Matt's. They already had. My hands trembled as I shoved the papers back into the folder. I wanted to confront them right then and there, but something inside me froze. I could already hear how it would go. "You're being selfish, Mark. This is what families do. Matt needs this more than you do." They'd make me the villain in my own story, and Matt would stand there smirking, like he always did when I got shoved into a corner. I set the folder down and walked back into the living room, trying to mask the fury boiling in my chest. Matt was lounging on the couch, scrolling through his phone with his new watch glinting under the light. My mom sat beside him, rubbing his shoulder, while my dad refilled his glass of soda like a waiter at a five-star restaurant. "Everything okay, Mark?" my dad asked casually, not even looking up. I forced a nod. "Yeah, fine." But I wasn't fine. I was holding onto a secret that had just detonated inside me. A betrayal so sharp it cut clean through the last shred of trust one had in them. They hadn't just ignored my graduation. They hadn't just asked me to contribute. They had already taken what was mine, what I'd bled and sweated for, and handed it to Matt like it was his birthright. Later that night, after I finally left and sat in my car with the engine off, I couldn't stop replaying it in my head. Every time my dad had told me, "We'll help you when we can." Every time my mom said, "Don't worry, we've got your back." They weren't promises. They were lies. Lies to keep me compliant while they siphoned away everything I built for myself. And the worst part? Matt knew. I could see it in the smug little grin he flashed when I walked back into the living room. He knew, and he enjoyed it. That was the moment something broke inside me. Not just disappointment. Not just frustration. Something harder. Colder. For the first time, I realized my family wasn't just neglectful or biased. They were opportunistic. They were willing to take everything from me to keep Matt on his pedestal. I drove home with my diploma case in the passenger seat, but it didn't feel like an achievement anymore. It felt like a shield, something I'd need if I wanted to survive the war my family had silently declared against me. And as I lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling, I made myself a promise. I wouldn't confront them yet. Not until I had a plan. Not until I knew exactly how to turn their betrayal into a weapon. Because if they thought I'd just keep giving, they were about to learn the hard way what happens when you push someone too far. The next few weeks were some of the hardest of my life. Graduation was supposed to feel like a beginning, a new chapter, a clean slate. Instead, it felt like the walls of everything I had built were closing in on me. Every time I checked my bank account, the reality stared me down, thousands of dollars gone, drained by the very people who were supposed to have my back. I still went through the motions. I showed up to my new job at the marketing firm on time, wore my pressed shirts, and smiled when my manager congratulated me for making a strong start. On the outside, I looked fine, but inside, I was unraveling. Every morning, I'd wake up with this heaviness in my chest, knowing that while I was trying to take steps forward, my family had already yanked me 3 steps back. I stopped answering their calls for a while. My dad would text things like, "When can we expect you to pitch in?" Or, Matt's tuition deposit is due soon. We need to talk. My mom would sprinkle hers with guilt. It hurt Matt that you didn't come to his game. Or, family helps family, Mark. Don't shut us out. Every message made my stomach twist. I couldn't even open the family group chat anymore without feeling sick. And yet, as much as I wanted to walk away, a part of me couldn't. Not fully. I was tethered to them by years of conditioning, by that quiet voice that whispered, maybe they'll see you eventually. Maybe if you just give a little more, they'll finally treat you as part of the family. That hope, however faint, kept me answering the occasional call, kept me driving over on Sundays when my mom insisted I come for dinner. Those dinners became unbearable. Matt would sit at the head of the table now, telling stories about his football team or bragging about the new car my savings had helped buy. He'd toss me smug glances, as if daring me to say something. My parents, oblivious or willfully blind, would nod along, praising him for being so responsible now that he's an adult. I remember one night in particular. My dad raised a toast to Matt, saying, "We're so proud of you, son. You've got the world ahead of you." Then he turned to me, almost as an afterthought. "And Mark, thanks for stepping up to help your brother. That's what family does." The clinking of glasses rang in my ears like mockery. I didn't even lift mine. I just sat there, staring at my plate, while my hands curled into fists under the table. They had no idea what that help cost me. They didn't care. It was then I realized I was reaching a breaking point. I couldn't keep subjecting myself to this cycle. Work hard, get drained, sit through dinners where my existence was background noise. But walking away wasn't easy either. Family bonds, no matter how frayed, have a way of holding on to you like chains. So I started small. I stopped telling them about my life. When my mom asked about work, I gave vague answers. When my dad pressed about my salary, I deflected. I became quieter at dinners, fading into the background so thoroughly they barely noticed when I left early. In those moments of silence, though, something was happening. Beneath the exhaustion and anger, I was quietly collecting pieces of a plan. I started saving again, this time in an account they didn't know about. I combed through my bank records, carefully noting every unauthorized withdrawal, building a private file of evidence. I didn't know what I'd do with it yet, but just having it made me feel like I had some control again. And I started watching, paying attention to the way my dad managed money, to the things Matt bragged about, to the cracks in their perfect little picture. Matt had a habit of overspending, designer shoes, video games, fancy dinners with his friends. My parents covered for him, but I noticed the stress in their voices when they thought he wasn't listening. Bills piling up, a mortgage payment missed, the car loan not as under control as they claimed. For the first time, I saw them not as an untouchable wall I could never climb, but as a structure with weaknesses, fault lines that could be exploited if I was careful. Still, in the meantime, I sank lower. My trust was gone, my savings stolen, and my achievements dismissed. Some nights I sat in my apartment staring at the diploma on the wall, wondering if it meant anything at all. Was it just a piece of paper, or could it be the weapon I needed to carve out a life beyond their reach? I didn't have all the answers yet. All I knew was that if I stayed on the path they wanted for me, I'd be nothing more than Matt's shadow, his silent benefactor. And I was done being invisible. I wasn't strong enough yet to strike back, but I was patient. And patience, I realized, might be the one thing my family underestimated about me. The shift didn't happen overnight. It started with little things, small victories that felt almost too insignificant to matter at first, but each one built on the last until I realized I was no longer stuck at the bottom. My job, for one, became more than just a paycheck. I threw myself into it, partly to escape the weight of my family's expectations, partly because it was the one place where my hard work actually counted. My manager noticed quickly. Within a couple of months, I was trusted with projects most new hires didn't touch for a year. I stayed late when I needed to, not out of desperation, but because I wanted to see what I could build when no one was there to dismiss me. And when the results came in, campaigns that outperformed expectations, clients who remembered my name, it was like breathing clean air for the first time. The first raise came faster than I thought it would. A modest bump in pay, but enough to make me feel like I was finally moving forward again. Instead of funneling that money into the same old account, I opened a new one under a digital-only bank. No paper statements, no chance of my dad finding it shoved in a drawer like the last time. This one was mine, truly mine. Every paycheck, I skimmed off a percentage and tucked it away like a secret weapon. Outside of work, I started reconnecting with people I'd drifted from. Friends who had been there in high school and college. People I'd pulled away from because family drama always swallowed my attention. It was strange at first, showing up to happy hours, answering texts I used to ignore. But slowly, it reminded me I had a world beyond my parents' house. One friend even introduced me to a mentor, a financial advisor who, after hearing my story, gave me a simple but life-changing piece of advice. Don't just save, invest. So I did. Carefully, quietly, I started putting money into stocks, a retirement account, even a small side business opportunity with a colleague. It wasn't flashy, but it was mine. Every decision was mine. For the first time, I wasn't just surviving, I was building. Meanwhile, back at my parents' house, the cracks I'd noticed before started widening. Matt loved flaunting his new car, taking road trips with friends, buying expensive clothes he couldn't afford. He racked up credit card debt so quickly I heard my mom whispering about it over the phone when she thought no one was listening. My dad, still pretending everything was under control, started pressing me harder. "Mark, you need to pitch in again," he'd say. "Matt's got a big future, and we can't let a little financial strain hold him back." But this time, I didn't cave. I smiled politely at dinners, said I'd look at my budget, then changed the subject. I watched their frustration build as they realized I wasn't as easy to manipulate anymore. It was subtle, but I could feel the balance shifting. The real turning point came at work when I landed a major client. A contract big enough that my boss pulled me into his office and said, "You've got a future here, Mark. Not just as an employee, but as a leader." He gave me a bonus on the spot. When I transferred that money into my secret account, I couldn't stop grinning. For once, my hard work translated into something tangible, something untouchable by anyone else. I started dressing sharper, speaking more confidently, carrying myself differently. Friends noticed. Colleagues noticed. Even strangers seemed to treat me with more respect. And every time I caught my reflection, I saw a version of myself that no longer resembled the invisible kid at my parents' dinner table. Of course, my family didn't miss the change either. At the next Sunday dinner, Matt eyed my watch, a modest one I bought to replace the cracked plastic one I'd worn for years, and made a snide comment. "Guess work is paying off, huh? Maybe you can finally get me those new tires I need." I laughed. Not bitterly, not nervously, just laughed. "Maybe you should get them yourself, Matt." The table went quiet for a beat, and the look on his face was worth every ounce of restraint I'd practiced. My dad quickly smoothed it over, changing the subject, but I saw the flicker in his eyes too, the realization that I wasn't falling in line anymore. It was intoxicating, that feeling. Power, even in small doses, was addictive. I wasn't ready to make my move yet, but I could feel the tide turning. And deep down, I knew. If I kept building, if I stayed patient, the day would come when I wouldn't just defend myself from their manipulation. I would be in a position to turn the tables completely. Because what my family never understood was this. The kid they ignored, the son they drained dry, was learning how to grow stronger in silence. And soon enough, silence would give way to something they couldn't laugh off, couldn't guilt me out of, couldn't control. The real opening came in the most unexpected way, through Matt himself. By this point, I'd grown used to tuning out his constant bragging. Every Sunday dinner turned into a highlight reel of his achievements, his football stats, the parties he got invited to, the expensive things he wanted next. But one evening, in between bites of steak my parents had grilled just for Matt, he slipped up. He was showing off his new phone to my uncle, scrolling through photos of himself and his friends posing in front of his car. In the middle of all that flexing, a notification banner slid across his screen before he could hide it. "Payment past due. First National Bank." My uncle didn't notice, but I did. And when Matt's face briefly twisted into irritation before he brushed it off with another story, a light flickered in my mind. I knew he'd been reckless, but this was the first time I had confirmation that his spending wasn't just careless, it was catching up with him. Over the next couple of weeks, I started paying attention with sharper eyes. I noticed the stack of unopened envelopes on the console table by the front door, all from banks and credit card companies. I overheard my mom snapping at my dad late one night when I stopped by unexpectedly. "We can't keep covering for him. We're drowning too." My dad hushed her quickly when he realized I was nearby, but the words had already lodged in my head. They were in trouble. serious trouble. And unlike before, when they leaned on me without shame, I was in a position to see just how weak they'd become. Around the same time, my own job was skyrocketing. That big client I'd landed, they referred me to another, and then another. Before I knew it, I wasn't just one of the promising new hires. I was the guy they trusted to lead major accounts. The bonus checks started stacking up, and my mentor pushed me to do something I'd never thought possible. Open my own LLC on the side, consulting for smaller businesses who couldn't afford my firm's fees. At first, I hesitated. Wouldn't it be too much? But when I ran the numbers, my jaw dropped. Even a few clients on the side could double what I'd been saving every month. So I went for it, working evenings from my apartment, pouring the same focus into my clients as I did my full-time job. And it paid off. Within 6 months, my little side project was pulling in nearly as much as my salary. I set up a separate business account, careful and deliberate, every penny tracked. And here's the irony. While my family still treated me like the kid they could lean on, I was quietly becoming the one with real power. The kind of power they'd never expect, because they were too busy watching Matt spiral. The real turning point came when my dad called me on a Wednesday evening, his voice tight. "Mark, we need to talk. It's urgent." I almost ignored it. I'd been working on a client presentation, but something in his tone made me pick up. He danced around the subject for a while, asking how work was, whether I was doing well financially. Then he finally dropped it. "We need help with the house. Just a small loan to cover the mortgage. Things are a little tight with Matt starting college." I nearly laughed. A little tight. That was his way of saying they were sinking. And here he was, circling back to the same script he'd used at Matt's birthday, trying to frame it as family pulling together. But this time, I didn't answer right away. Instead, I asked questions. How far behind are you? What's the interest rate? Why hasn't Matt picked up more hours at his job? The silence on the other end was deafening. My dad muttered something about private family matters and then tried to guilt me. "Don't be selfish, Mark. You know we've always done everything for you." The old me would have caved under that guilt. The new me smiled, scribbled notes on a pad by my desk, and said, "Let me think about it." I hung up, heart racing, because now I had exactly what I needed. Proof that they weren't invincible, that their pedestal was crumbling. Over the next week, I started piecing things together. Public records, bank notices I discreetly glanced at when visiting, even whispers from relatives who had loaned my parents money and hadn't been paid back. It all painted the same picture. They were drowning financially, and Matt's endless demands had dragged them down faster. And me? I wasn't drowning anymore. I was standing on solid ground, watching them flail. For the first time in my life, I realized I held the upper hand. They needed me. They needed what I had built. The thought of it filled me with a strange mix of emotions. Anger, satisfaction, even a bit of fear. Because holding power was one thing. Deciding what to do with it was another. But one thing was clear. If I played this right, I wouldn't just protect myself from being drained again. I'd be able to make them feel exactly what they'd made me feel for years. Powerless, overlooked, desperate. And I wasn't going to waste that opportunity. When the opportunity finally presented itself, it felt almost too perfect. A few weeks after that tense phone call with my dad, my mom invited me over for dinner, her tone unusually sweet. I knew what that meant. They wanted something. Sure enough, the moment I stepped into the living room, I spotted Matt on the couch, pouting like a child, while my dad paced the floor. On the coffee table lay a stack of papers, neatly arranged but bristling with tension. "Mark," my dad started, trying to mask his urgency. "We need your help." Again, he gestured toward the papers. "The mortgage company is threatening foreclosure. It's all a misunderstanding, really, just a few payments behind. But if you could step in, temporarily, it would stabilize things until we're back on track." My mom chimed in, her voice soft, almost pleading. "You've always been so responsible, honey. We know we can count on you." And then Matt, smirking as always, added, "Yeah, bro, think of it as an investment. Once I get into the big leagues, I'll pay you back." He leaned back, crossing his arms, like he'd already decided I was in. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel small in that room. I didn't feel invisible or cornered. I felt calm, steady, in control. I sat down on the couch opposite them, folding my hands in my lap. "Okay," I said evenly. "Let's look at what you're asking." I picked up the stack of papers and flipped through them. Missed payments, interest charges, Penalty fees stacking higher and higher. It was worse than I thought. They weren't just a little behind. They were months from losing everything. So, I continued, my tone polite. You want me to bail you out? It's not a bailout, my dad snapped, his patience already thinning. It's family helping family. Funny, I said, tilting my head. Because I don't remember anyone helping me when I was working nights just to afford books. Or when my own savings. I let the word hang in the air. Suddenly disappeared. My dad's jaw tightened. My mom shifted uncomfortably. And Matt, realizing where I was going, quickly jumped in. That was different, Mark. You know it was for the greater good. You're fine now, aren't you? I smiled. Not the bitter, forced smile I used to wear at their table. A real one. Because this was the moment I'd been waiting for. You're right, I said calmly. I am fine now. Better than fine, actually. Which is why I can make you an offer. Their eyes lit up at that, relief flooding the room. My dad even sat down, as if he'd already won. Go on, he said eagerly. I'll cover the mortgage, I said slowly. But on one condition, the house goes into my name. Full ownership. No tricks, no half measures. You sign it over, and I'll make the payments. Otherwise, I tapped the papers with my finger. You'll have to figure it out on your own. The silence that followed was deafening. My mom's mouth fell open. My dad's face turned red, anger and disbelief warring in his expression. And Matt looked like someone had just told him Christmas was canceled. You can't be serious, my dad finally barked. That house is ours. You think you can just swoop in and take it? I don't think, I said evenly. I know. Because here's the truth. You need me. Without me, you lose the house. With me, you keep a roof over your heads, under my roof. Those are the terms. Take it or leave it. My mom started to cry, pleading with me to be reasonable, but I stayed firm. Years of being overlooked, dismissed, drained, it all crystallized into this single, steady moment. I wasn't shouting. I wasn't begging. I was calm. And that calm terrified them more than anger ever could. Matt slammed his fist on the table. You can't do this. Dad, tell him he can't do this. But my dad didn't answer right away. Because deep down, he knew I could. He knew I was holding all the cards. I stood, gathering the papers into a neat stack. Think it over, I said. But don't take too long. The bank's deadline isn't going to wait. And with that, I walked out, leaving them stunned in their own living room. My phone buzzed with calls and texts for hours afterward, alternating between rage and desperation, but I didn't answer. Not yet. For the first time in my life, they needed me more than I needed them. And I wasn't about to waste that leverage. They didn't take long to cave. 3 days later, my dad called me again. His voice hollow, stripped of the authority he'd always worn like armor. Bring the paperwork, he said. We'll sign. I drove over that evening with a folder tucked under my arm. The same kind of manila folder I'd once found in his office with my name scrawled across it. Only this time, it was his name on the line. My parents sat at the kitchen table, eyes downcast. Matt sulked in the corner, arms folded, glaring at me like a child denied dessert. The signing itself was quiet, almost clinical. My dad's hand trembled as he pressed the pen to paper, each signature a reluctant surrender. My mom dabbed at her eyes with a tissue, whispering this isn't fair under her breath, but she didn't fight it. And Matt exploded the moment it was done. You're a thief, he shouted, leaping to his feet. This house should have been mine one day. You stole it from me. I looked him dead in the eye. No, Matt. You stole from me. This is just balance. He stormed out, slamming the door so hard the picture frames rattled on the wall. My parents flinched, but I didn't. For once, his tantrums had no power over me. I collected the papers, slipped them back into the folder, and stood. The bank will get their payment tomorrow. The house is safe, for now. But remember, it's mine. You stay here because I allow it. My dad opened his mouth like he wanted to argue, then closed it again. The weight of his silence was almost satisfying. My mom tried to appeal to me one last time, her voice quivering. We're still your family, Mark. Doesn't that mean anything? I paused in the doorway, the same doorway I'd walked through countless times, invisible and overlooked. I thought about all the years of being dismissed, all the sacrifices they demanded without thanks, all the empty chairs at my graduation. Then I turned back just enough to meet her eyes. Family is earned. And with that, I left. The next morning, I wired the payment to the bank, securing the deed in my name. The house, the symbol of everything they had lorded over me, was now mine. My parents walked on eggshells around me after that, and Matt could barely look at me without seething. The pedestal he'd been placed on for 18 years crumbled overnight, and there was nothing they could do to rebuild it. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the overlooked son, the backup, the wallet. I was the one with the power. And as I drove past the house a week later, deed tucked safely in my briefcase, I couldn't help but think back to that empty row of seats at my graduation. They hadn't shown up for me then. But now, every single day, they were forced to live under a roof that proved one undeniable truth. I had finally shown up for myself.